Greetings, this is Dr. Timothy Emerick, and this new channel that we have started will be concentrating on sociological, psychological, criminological, and theological information applied to these different areas. I have a unique background because I have training in all these areas. I've worked in law enforcement and human services for over 30 years. I continue to teach in all these areas at different universities. I also teach in our state prisons with level 3 and 4 prisoners, which are people that are doing life with or without parole. And they have committed very serious crimes, murder and rape and carjackings, gang-related offenses, etc. You know, one of the things that really strikes me is that how many young men that I have seen throughout the years, both as a law enforcement officer and human services and as an instructor, both inside and outside of prisons, I see how young people start from a very dysfunctional family, and they go from a very dysfunctional family into foster care, and foster care is not a very good option for them, so they're moved from foster care to foster care, and they're abused sexually and physically while in foster care at times. There are very good foster care parents as well, but there are many that are not. And because of this anger that they're growing up with and dysfunctionalism, they go into juvenile crime. It might be, stealing something from a store, missing school, getting involved in a gang, might even steal a car, and go to juvenile hall, maybe a probation camp, and they get released. They have not really been able to deal with all the dysfunctionalism in their lives, and they start committing crimes as an adult, and they wind up in state prison. And it's very sad. One of the leading questions that I receive from people is, why do people commit crimes? And this is what basically we're going to be studying, but again, from all the different perspectives that I previously mentioned. There's no one easy answer. There's no one easy solution to help people involved in criminal behavior. No one wakes up in the morning, for the most part, unless they're a sociopath, and we'll have another teaching on that. But they don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to be a good day to rob a bank, or be a good day to murder somebody, or a good day to hijack somebody. There's a lot of different factors that are built into this decision process, and like I stated before, it starts as a very young child living in dysfunctional families. The men that I teach inside the state prisons, 99% said, yeah, Doc, I committed the crime I'm here for. And I said, what age did you begin your crime spree? And they said, 9, 10 years old. I said, tell me a little bit about your family. So my father, he was in and out of prison. My mom had to work 2 jobs. She was never around. My brothers got involved in gangs. My uncles and my aunts were involved in gangs, and it was just seemed like a normal life cycle to proceed with. And so, when you live in a very toxic environment, it's very hard for someone to really understand ramifications of their decisions. If your role models are criminals and thugs and drug addicts and people involved in prostitution and human trafficking and things like that, these kids growing up in these type of situations really don't have a chance of coming out with any proper role modeling or tutoring in their lives. So we're going to be discussing these type of things, and these videos, these teachings are no way to make excuses for people, but to help us understand what it is that makes people tick. Why do people get involved in criminal behavior? Now, there's several theories. I'm going to try to cover them generally. We're not going to get very deeply involved in them because, first of all, I don't want to burden you with a lot of data, but I do want to go over a lot of theories with us to help us understand why people are involved. The first theory I want to talk about is the rational choice theory. And the rational choice theory is people who generally act in their self-interest and make decisions to commit crime after weighing the risks. And what that means is that they think that the wealth that they can get from committing a crime outweighs the possibility of being caught. So this is a rational decision that they've made. But once again, remember that if you have a child 3-4 years old and is shipped off to foster homes, and he's come from a home where there's domestic violence and drug use, etc., and this is all the child knows, and they go into foster homes that maybe not be adequately equipped to handle a child like that, then of course the dysfunctionalism in their lives is only going to amplify, and they're going to get worse. And so some young men in prison say, Doc, this is the way I was brought up, this is the way I lived, and I know now that 30 years later I'm a different person. They're taking classes, they're programming, self-help classes as well as college classes. And I had this one young man that in prison that he said that he was incarcerated at the age of 15. He went to youth authority. And him and his father invited him one afternoon to go out and rob 2 other drug dealers. His father was a drug dealer, and he brought his son along. What a decent role model he is, huh? And so he brought his son along to rob these other 2 drug dealers, pretending that they were going to buy drugs from them. The father, things went south. The father shot both drug dealers, killed them, and he told his son, since you're a juvenile, you say that you shot these 2 gentlemen, and they won't give you much time, and they won't give me much time. So he did. The father was not convicted of the murder. He was out in, I think it was about 12 years. This young man is now 40 years old, and he's been in since he was 15. He was convicted of the murder of these 2 individuals. He has life without parole. So, when we look at these type of things, yes, it was a rational choice. Yes, he went along with his father, but think of how you were when you were 15. I know when I was 15, I didn't think with all my marbles, and I made a lot of mistakes. The next one I want to talk about is the social disorganization theory. Social disorganization theory. And that's a theory where a person's physical and social environments play a big role in behavioral choices in their lives, the area where they grew up in. If they grew up in a very poor neighborhood where they don't have a lot of options, a lot of opportunities, selling drugs or whatever they're doing is something that is very favorable to them, because instead of working at McDonald's part-time for $10 an hour or whatever it is, they can make $300 in a couple hours, and they can buy the Nikes and all the jewelry they want and things like that, and they're considered heroes. In the social disorganization theory, usually the family is torn apart. There is no father. If there is a father, he's in and out of prison, in and out of the family. Siblings also are very disorganized into gangs, a lot of gang behavior. And when we look at gang behavior, the reason why young boys and girls get into gangs is because it's fulfilling needs that they have of self-protection. It helps them entrepreneurship. It gives them respect. It gives them power. It gives them a family. If their own family is not there and has fallen apart, well, at least the gang offers them a family atmosphere where they're part of a family and they feel accepted and wanted and promoted. So, again, it boils down to the breakdown of the family. It boils down to where, in these types of neighborhoods, social disorganization, which destroys the very fabric of a society as well as, people's lives, play a big part in why young men and women get involved in crime. These type of neighborhoods, once again, have very poor schools. They have vacant buildings with used for drugs and high unemployment, and a mix of commercial and residential property. Most of these very poor areas have projects, and projects, although they offer housing, but they are hotbeds for criminal activity, and this is something we need to take into consideration also. The next one I want to talk about is the strain theory. And the strain theory is that, we all have similar aspirations. We as parents, I know that I wanted to do the very best for my children. That's why I continue to study, and that I continue to work and do different things. But, as a young man growing up, or a young lady growing up in the areas that we have talked about, they don't have that type of role model. And so there's a real conflict within them, because they want to achieve certain things. They want to have a good job and a house and a car and all these different things, but yet the lifestyle that they're involved in is a constant rub against what they can achieve. Not many people will hire people that have been in and out of jail. And there's a thing called cultural collateral within sociological and psychological theories. And cultural collateral is that, say for instance, a person, say that is Caucasian, gets caught for doing cocaine. And, he's been in a job for 20 years. He has let's say a BA, he owns a house. He's been with Kiwanis or teaching Little League, and goes to church and has people on his behalf talk to the judge, stating that he is not a flight risk. So he receives a very low bail because he has cultural collateral. Now, let's say you have a person of color that goes before the same judge, that dropped out of junior high school, does not have a job, has never really worked in a job, doesn't have a stable residence. He doesn't show any attachment to the community, so he's considered a high flight risk, and he'll receive high bail. So when you have cultural collateral, there is a very positive aspect of helping you out in the criminal justice system, as well as when you don't have cultural collateral, it sort of shuts doors for you. And truly remember, being a law enforcement officer and working with these type of people throughout my career, it's very clear to me that there is no justice in the justice system per se. If you have a lot of money, you can have expert witnesses and psychologists and all kinds of people talk on your behalf and impress the jury and etc. But if you don't have that type of backing, then the best you can hope for is a plea deal with the public defender for something maybe you not have done. But they press you into making a plea deal because they have a very burdensome caseload, and they want to just get on to the next case. So if you're looking at 30 to life, and the prosecutor offers you 15 to 20 years, everybody in their right mind would take that to 15 to 20 years instead of 30 to life. So, these are the type of things that they come up against as well. The next one is the social learning theory. This is one of the social learning theory is one of the most powerful theories that we can look at. It has to do with modeling. We imitate people who we hang with. If you hang with a bunch of criminals and people that are that lifestyle, well, that's who are your role models, and you're going to imitate them, and you're going to walk with them and talk with them and live like them and live with them. If you're growing up in this type of environment, there's a lot of domestic violence. There's a lot of violence. Many children, when I was working, child abuse, many kids. I'd find many kids, and I'd say, how many people here, how many of you guys here have lost a loved one to a gang shooting or a relative to a gang shooting? And in some of these very poor neighborhoods, you'd get up to 60% of those children raising their hand, talking about losing a brother, a father, a sister, an uncle, a dear friend. And, that's post-traumatic stress that these little ones go through, and they're not being really worked with to help. So, these are the type of things that we need to take in consideration when we're talking about criminological behavior. The next one is the social control theory. The social control theory is that there are certain expectations that society has for us, and they should have certain social controls, which is law enforcement and ideologies that we need to follow and the way they're taught to us. But at the same time, we need to understand that through these institutions of workplaces and families and churches, etc., they're instilling certain values in us. But when there's a conflict of those certain values, there's a lot of people that go to church and they'll shake their head in church, and yes, it's real good, but when they get on the outside, they see, well, it's not a reality in my world. How do I apply what I'm hearing when Grandma takes me to church on Sunday? How do I apply that to my real life? How do I apply that when I see my father beating my mother to a pulp? How do I apply that to, seeing someone killed in front of me? How do I apply that to gangs pressuring me to join them? If I don't, they'll beat me up. See? So, when you have these very important theories, we need to understand that all theories are over-encompassing. They're not mutually exclusive. We can't just say this is the only way, this is the only theory that we can analyze why people commit crimes. The labeling theory. The labeling theory is a theory that, a lot of people do crime because they have been labeled as a very young age as dysfunctional, deviant. I know that a lot of these men that I've spoken with in prison and people outside of prison had very bad parental relationships. Like I said, if the father was there, he was very abusive, not only physically but psychologically. Some of these kids were abused by their own parents. When I've done, counseling for sex offenders, some of these people have abused sexually and physically their own children. And so when you have a labeling theory where a child has been constantly abused and told they're no good and told they're going to do nothing good with their life, well, then they begin to think that that's the way they are. They begin to think that they were stupid. I remember I was going through the projects one day, and I was, in my civilian clothes, and everybody would say, "Hey, officer, how you doing?" And so I'm walking by this young boy, and I said to him in Spanish, I said, "How you doing?" And he answered me in Spanish, "Oh, muy bien, señor." I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Pendejo." And pendejo in Spanish means like dumbass, forgive my language. So I said, no. I said, what's your name? And he said, "Pendejo." And I said, "No, mijo." I said, no, that's not your name. What's your name? And before he answered again, his mother from the back row of the projects, an apartment back there, yelled out, "Pendejo, where are you?" But in Spanish, right? And so I walked over there and I showed my badge and I told her, I said, "If I ever hear you calling that child again, right, I'm going to take you into custody for severe neglect. And I'm going to be back and I'm going to ask that little guy what's his name next week when I come back. And he better say Jose. You have better let him know that his name is not Pendejo, but is Jose." So can you imagine a child growing up and, their own parent has called them dumbass? Can you imagine that in their life that they're considered an idiot, no good, worthless? How many times do I hear people say, "You're just like your father, you're no good, you're going to wind up in prison, you're going to do this, you're going to do that." Or mothers would say to their daughters, you're acting like a little whore, and you're not going to do any good, you'll probably be pregnant by the age of 13. So they're professing over their children all these curses. And the labeling theory says that when we hear all these different things, we're gonna imitate those. We're gonna do those things. George Herbert Mead had a theory called the looking glass self. And the looking glass self, this is a sociological, psychological theory, and it says that in the looking glass self that a person who as growing up in society, they will look around in their environment and imitate how people look because they don't want to be on the outside. They don't want to look like an ugly duckling. They don't want to look like they're not in the groove with everybody else. And that's very powerful stuff. You know, you look at music videos and all this stuff that's on TV and what have you, and all this hip hop stuff, and how they show women are being treated and how women are portraying themselves within the video. And young girls and young boys latch on to these images and to this type of lifestyle and social learning. And it's no wonder that in the violent society that we live in, that has, in my opinion, morals upside down, and glorify, wealth over hard work, glorify, quick money over education, glorify that which God would say is terrible. And these are kids are growing up with kids that have no foundations. Kids that have no foundations, no spiritual foundation, no psychological foundation, no sociological foundation. They don't have a character built within them because they've never had a decent role model. They've never had a person that would really care about them and help them. So can you imagine growing up in a neighborhood like that? It's very easy for us to point fingers and you say, why do these people commit so much crime? Well, if that's all they've known in their entire life, how to get ahead and how to get money and resolve conflict with beatings and stabbings and things like that, then of course this is what they're going to result to. You have children growing up in domestic violence homes, and children are very aggressive in school. Little kids are very aggressive in school because they've seen daddy beat mama or vice versa, and they look at those type of things, and this is the way they are. In 1994, 1993 really, we were taking a lot of Salvadorian women into custody for domestic violence and physical abuse of their children. And talking amongst the different officers that we had there, they say, well, these people, that's the way they live, and that's the way they are. And I said, there's got to be a reason. So I began to discuss with them or talk with them, these women from El Salvador and Central America, and I learned that they had a civil war down there. And in the civil war that went on for probably 10 years, the North would come in, I would say the government would come in, and then, they'd rape the women and the girls and take the boys off the war and kill the fathers. And then the rebels would come in and do the exact same thing. And so I did my dissertation on post-traumatic stress disorder associated with child abuse in the Salvadorian community. And I learned that a lot of these women, when they began to get a human trafficker to leave the children with grandma, the very small children, would have to go through El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico and the United States, and they were beaten, and they were drugged and made as work as prostitutes. And so they themselves, through the war, suffered very traumatic experiences, and then they also, trying to get to the United States to earn a living for their family, went through very traumatic experiences, and they were suffering sleeping disorders, eating disorders, everything that post-traumatic stress disorder has, all the symptomology they were expressing in their lives. And so when I did my dissertation, which took me 7 years, with 4 years of classwork and 3 years of research, I went to El Salvador during the middle war of the Civil War down there. And I was speaking to soldiers. I was speaking to civilians. I spoke to a lot of civilians, and I went over their experiences with them of what they were experiencing in living in the middle of a war zone. When I was down there and I took a bus to different parts of El Salvador, it was not uncommon to see bodies spewed on the side of the road. It was not uncommon to see headless bodies. It was not uncommon to see their bodies ripped open and set on fire. That was a very common event down there. And can you imagine seeing that, witnessing that, and what people go through and the nightmares and the night scares and the sweats that they have in the middle of the night, and afraid of loud noises, etc. And they can't eat and can't sleep, and they self-medicate by drinking and maybe taking drugs or whatever to try to stop the craziness that's going on in their head. And then I went to our county jails of the women that have been convicted of child abuse, and Salvadorian women convicted of child abuse or domestic violence. And they talked about the same type of situation that their people in El Salvador was going through. And they talked about the human smuggling that they went through and the trafficking, and they have to work as prostitutes and working in bars and beaten by their pimps, and they were going through very terrible times. And so looking at those things and taking those things into consideration, we must understand that, yes, we must be hard on crime. I understand that. As a law enforcement officer, I understand that. But at the same time, I need to make a statement that we need early intervention in children's lives, and not just psychological, not just sociological, but theological. We need to get people to understand the love of God. We need to understand that this world is not God's world. This world belongs to the enemy. This world belongs to Satan. And God has given mankind a very important aspect of their personality, and that is rational choice. We can choose to come to God and live for Him or not. And a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't. I remember one gentleman, his name was Mariano, and when I was working in the county jail as a chaplain for a while, I was going in on Tuesdays and Thursdays and sharing Bible studies and stuff. He had been in and out of custody, I think it was about 7 times for DUIs and things like that. And so, he sat for about 6 months in my Bible studies, and he came up and he said, Doc, I'm going to be released in a couple of weeks. And I want to know where your church is, because I'm going to go there with my wife and my children. And I said, fine. I gave him the address. And sure enough, he showed up. He showed up with his wife and his children, and he stayed serving God and staying straight and not involved in alcohol. And his children turned out very well. He stayed for 20 years. God changed his life around. So there is hope. But psychology without Jesus, sociology without Jesus, criminology without Jesus, there's no hope. It's just labeling what people have done, what people will continue to do, but there needs to be a break. There needs to be a break in that chain of curses that they have in their life, and only Christ can do that. I stated in the very beginning, as a psychologist, sociologist, criminologist, I'm also a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, and I've seen how the Lord can change lives if people are willing to turn their lives over. So we're going to be starting a series of talking about criminology, psychopathic behavior, sociopathic behavior, narcissistic behavior, etc., in the videos to come. And I hope that you become a member of the channel, and then you can use this information to help people that that are struggling. Send them the video as well. Talk to them. Give them, the information where they can get a hold of me and talk with me, and I'd be more than happy to counsel them. I'm counseling people all the time. People that have gotten out of custody. I've counseled officers. I'm counseling officers now. I counsel teachers. Everybody that's that needs help, I'm more than willing to do that. So once again, thank you for spending this time. Please share this video. Please subscribe to the channel. And may the Lord Jesus Christ richly bless you, and that you understand that He loves you and He wants you to have an abundant life. Bye-bye.